some aspect of these issues. So we are really lucky this week that we have our guest speaker, Dorje Gurun. Dorje is very popular with the crowd already, I can see. So Dorje is an international educator, a social worker, and a lecturer. He travels around the globe giving talks, which means that we're really lucky to have him talk today for us in Wisdom Wednesdays, and to share some stories from his life and how it connects to ethical volunteering. So please welcome Dorje Gurun.
Right. Oh, did I hit something?
It's all right, it's all right.
Okay. In case you didn't hear it or you can't read, my name is Dorje Gurun. And as Claire mentioned, I'm a former international science teacher, but currently a social worker, working in Nepal, running a non-profit called Community Members Interested. We work with public schools, so that means I'm still working in education. Can you all hear me, by the way? Okay, perfect. Before I go on, I'd like to thank Claire and Tenzing for this opportunity to come speak, and of course the NGN team. I'd like to actually start off with a joke to kind of lighten up the mood a little. If you have been in Kathmandu long enough, you would have noticed the Nepalese drivers on the streets of Kathmandu love tooting their horns. You can hear them right now, as a matter of fact. You know they love to honk, right? So much so that they honk even when in a traffic jam. And do you know why they honk in a jam? Does anyone here know why they honk?
They're frustrated.
Okay, good one. But many of you probably won't believe me when I say this. They actually honk to unjam the jam. I know, sounds insane, right? But yes, it is true. They actually honk because they know that that's the way to get a traffic jam to unjam. I'll tell you something else that you probably don't believe, and which you probably don't know either. That honking at a traffic jam actually works. Honking does actually unjam a traffic jam in Kathmandu. I know it works. I see some of you looking at me like he's gone off his rocker. I actually do know that it works. And do you know how I know that it works? I know because everyone does it. I know it works because everyone does it. Yeah, I know. All right, the rest of the presentation is about something many come to Nepal for, and many also go to other developing countries for, namely volunteering. I don't see a whole lot of you here who look like visitors, but how many of you here are to volunteer? How many of you are here in Nepal to volunteer? Okay, 5. Okay, not that big. All right. So it doesn't look like most of you are here to volunteer, but I think it's a fair statement to say that a lot of foreign visitors to Nepal come here to volunteer. But does that make volunteering, whether in Nepal or elsewhere, does that make it an appropriate thing to do, or a good thing to do necessarily, or the right thing to do? And that is what I am here to talk to you about the rest of the time here. But before I talk about that, a little bit more about me. Like I said earlier, I'm a social worker. I was first introduced to social work when I was a student at St. Xavier's. The idea of service was introduced to me at this school as a 5th grader when I was really young. And not coincidentally, it was also at that same year that I first entertained 2 dreams of mine which would guide my life subsequently. My first dream was to be, in Nepali, Tulo Manche. In other words, to be a big man, an important man, a good man. And the second one was to, as we again in Nepali say, Desko Sewa गर्ने, to serve my country. And of course, as a 5th grader, I hadn't quite figured out how I was going to do all of that. But I had also learned then that all I needed to do was get a scholarship to go study in the United States of America. And that, I believed, would equip me well to do whatever I wanted to do, to fulfill those 2 dreams. Coming from a poor family, by then I was already completely aware of the difficulties and the suffering of the poor in Nepal. In 1988, I got a full scholarship, including plane ticket and pocket money, to study at the United World College of the Adriatic in Duino, Italy. And following that, I again got pretty much a full scholarship to Grinnell College in Iowa, fulfilling what once had appeared to me to be an almost impossible dream. And graduating from Grinnell, I started an incredible international career, teaching, traveling, and exploring the world for almost 20 years. I lived and worked in 9 different countries, traveled to about 3 dozen others, and finally, in May 2013, 25 years since first leaving the country, I gave up teaching and returned to Nepal to fulfill my second childhood dream of serving my country, and embarked on my second career, which you already know, as a social worker. And what does all of that have anything to do with volunteering? To begin with, a bit about my social work, my social service, and volunteering experience. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, I first had a taste for service and therefore social work and volunteering as a 5th grader. Every Tuesday afternoon, all 5th and 6th graders at this primary school would go out in groups of 5 on what was called panchayat work. We'd go to the home of a local family and assist the family with household chores. And as a secondary school student, I did a number of volunteer work at and with Godavari Alumni Association, GAA, the St. Xavier's Alumni Association. I volunteered at Winter Day Camp, volunteered at health camps at Gongabu Village, and my little nephew there is desperately wanting my attention, so I'm going to wave at him. Right. So I volunteered at Winter Day Camp, at health camps at Gongavu Village, which is outside of Kathmandu then. And as a 10th grader myself, I volunteered to teach science, math, and English to 10th grade students from public schools at what used to be called coaching classes. I also volunteered to be in the editorial board of GAA, etc. At the United World College of the Adriatic, social service was part of the curriculum, so I didn't even have to go looking for opportunities. The summer of 1989, the summer between my first year, the 2 years in Italy, visiting Nepal, I volunteered at Siwin, child workers in Nepal, spending time with street children who sought refuge at their shelter. But at Grinnell, however, the level of volunteering I did reduced drastically. I did go to what was called alternative spring break to a Native American reservation in Iowa. Except now, thanks to Conway, that name, alternative spring break, has a kind of a different ring to it. But anyway, things changed completely when I became a teacher, a professional. I did not volunteer in other countries at all. And it wasn't because I stopped believing in social work and or volunteering. Of course not. And it wasn't because for lack of opportunities either. A number of countries I worked at, I could have volunteered. Azerbaijan, for instance, as wealthy as it was, had a population that suffered from disproportionate level of poverty because of a dictatorship. Vietnam had its own social problems, as did even the UK, the US, and Qatar, the world's richest country in terms of per capita income. One country, however, stands out, and that is the small country of Malawi in southern Africa. I spent 3 years there from 2004 to 2007. HIV/AIDS and malaria killed so many that the problem with orphans was massive. Here are some details about the country. Can you all see that? I hate reading out what I project, so I'm not going to bother you with that. To give you an idea of how much a killer HIV/AIDS was, let me share an exchange I had with Saeed, our science lab technician. On a hot spring afternoon in 2007, he tells me that he's taking personal leave and going to his village next week. Why? I ask. He says, for my brother's funeral. After a couple of more exchanges, I established that he has died from complications arising from HIV/AIDS. And then he adds, me only one left. A little confused, I go, what do you mean, Saeed? He says, all my brothers and sister dead. Really taken aback, I ask, "How many were you?" He says, 12. Next slide, please. And they had all died from complications arising from HIV/AIDS. But Malawi had a savior, in quotes, Madonna. Those of you here in their 30s and older might remember this. I was in Lilongwe then, when all of this happened. In addition to adopting a baby, she set up a charity that was supposed to support the 1,000,000 orphans in the country. I was not part of that circus, even remotely, before or after Madonna's visit. As a matter of fact, I did nothing with or for the local communities, apart from teaching at the international school I was employed by. So, anyway, to get back to the point I wanted to make earlier, I stopped volunteering as a professional not because I had stopped believing in it or for lack of opportunities. Rather, it was a choice I made. I had a number of reasons, but the most important reason was this. I felt it would be too arrogant of me to think that I could make a difference in the lives of people who I didn't really feel invested in for long term. Incidentally, that's my nephew. Kind of a nice segue, because the next thing I'm going to say also starts with the word incidentally. Incidentally, today the small and the beautiful country of Malawi is the poorest nation on the planet. And last I heard, Madonna was planning to adopt 2 more children. I don't know what happened to the charity she set up to help the 1,000,000 children, the 1,000,000 orphans. We must all make our own decisions about what we do and don't do in the foreign countries we visit or live in. We can't all be doing what everyone does just because everyone does it. Like honking when in a traffic jam on the streets of Kathmandu. And when you do something that everyone else does, sometimes it might actually make the situation worse. Like, again, honking in a traffic jam on the streets of Kathmandu. And volunteering at an orphanage could potentially be like honking in a traffic jam. Volunteering especially volunteering at orphanages, is indeed fraught with pitfalls. Here are some of them. That the majority of orphanages are centered around popular destinations should tell you something. orphanages make money both from the parents and volunteers. And of course, volunteering fuels trafficking because it creates a demand for orphans. And to add to the last point, yes, it is illegal, but it is also possible to volunteer on a tourist visa. Hold on. Having said that, I do volunteer in Nepal in addition to running Committed. Quite a lot, as a matter of fact. So I'm not saying you shouldn't volunteer at all. But if you choose to, I hope you do so after weighing in all the pros and cons, after gathering all the information you can get your hands on, and having questioned yourself long and hard. Here are some of the questions you can ask yourself. If you're not happy with the answers you get, there are many, many other ways to contribute to Nepal and to the people of Nepal. You can, for example, just be an ethical tourist by supporting services provided and businesses run by the locals, among a host of other things. What I hope is that you don't just volunteer just because everyone is doing it. With that, I would like to end this talk here. Thanks for being an attentive audience, except for my little nephew back there. If you need more information about me and my work, here's where you can get them. The details of which you can also find in my business card, which will be passed around. Thank you.
Oh, I've also just been told to thank Spider-Man.
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man, who's Dorjo's nephew, who's been keeping us entertained all evening. So next week, Wednesday, April the 12th, same time, 5:30, same place here. We are having another Wisdom Wednesdays where we have the Chief of American Citizens Service from the US Embassy, Jeremy Jewett, who is a good friend of NGN, is going to come and talk about actually the role of embassies and how he has been supporting tourists, specifically US tourists, but I think it applies across the board, to have a safe and responsible stay in Nepal. So I think he has some quite amusing stories to share, and also some advice about how to ensure that you're being ethical when you come and stay in Nepal. So it should be really interesting, and it's a really huge honour for us to have someone so high up in the US Embassy to come and chat to us in a pub. So hopefully that will be great. So we look forward to welcoming you to another Wisdom Wednesdays either next week, or we have ongoing for the next 3 weeks after today. Thanks very much.
He wants to sing. Right. I'm sure you aren't expecting or weren't expecting the kind of entertainment that I have for you. But it is a consolation entertainment. My little nephew wants to sing.
We are going to the market. We are going to the. We are going to the market. We are going to the. To see the senorita with flower on her head. To see the senorita with flower on her head. Shake it, shake it, shake it, shake it as you can. Shake it, shake it, shake it, shake it as you can. Shake it like some music into your machine. Hey, rumble to the bottom. Rumble to the top, rumble to the bottom, rumble to the top. Turn around and turn around, do the main stop.
Kita kaya. Kita kaya. Oh, labaw lagi.